Okay, let's unpack this one because the headline involving a Florida nurse, Alexis Von Yates, it's genuinely startling.
It really is.
We're diving straight into the accusations that she had sex with her 15-year-old stepson and what she reportedly told her husband right afterwards. Get ready, because it's quite a statement.
This is a case that immediately presents us with a really disturbing set of allegations, yes. But it also kind of prompts us to look beyond just the sensational headline, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And maybe consider the deeper currents that might be, at play here.
Right. So for this deep dive, we've gathered more than just the news report. The New York Post, one detailing the accusations and the court documents.
Mm-hmm.
We've also brought in a couple of articles and actually a Reddit thread that explore the broader and, frankly, quite prevalent interest in sexual attraction to stepmothers and older women.
Yep.
The whole MILF or cougar phenomenon.
And our aim here, just to be clear, isn't really to judge the specific people involved in this case. That's for the courts.
No, absolutely.
Instead, we want to use it as a kind of focal point to explore potential underlying factors, wider societal discussions really surrounding these kinds of attractions.
Yeah, connecting this specific story with the more general themes we see in the other sources.
Precisely.
Okay, all right. Let's get into the specifics then. The allegations against Alexis Von Yates, this is based on that New York Post report from May 2025.
Right.
The core accusation is sexual battery on her 15-year-old stepson, supposedly happening back in July 2024 in Ocala, Florida.
And this was during a visit while his father, who is her husband, was out at work.
Yes, and the report makes it pretty clear that the husband reportedly discovered them, like in the act.
Which is obviously a critical moment. It triggers everything that follows, the reactions, the different accounts of what happened.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe bizarre is the word. Von Yates apparently tried to apologize to her husband right then, while completely naked under a blanket.
Claiming the teenager looked like a younger version of him, of the husband. It's just a truly strange explanation. What do you even make of that?
It's certainly not what you'd expect someone to say in that situation.
Yeah.
It's an unexpected rationale, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But the stepson's version of events, that directly contradicts her claim. Von Yates apparently claims she told him to stop.
Right.
But according to the affidavit, the teen told police that she was moaning him and actually encouraged him to continue. So a starkly different narrative there.
Completely different. And the lead up, the report details that too. After putting her younger kids to bed, she joins the stepson to watch a horror movie, The Terrifier.
Okay.
The husband, he's a lineman, still on duty, and the conversation then reportedly takes a turn. She mentions being horny because of a lack of recent sex and being on her period.
The level of detail in the affidavit, it really paints a disturbing picture of how things allegedly escalated.
Yeah, from just talking to cuddling and kissing, and then, well, reportedly progressing to oral sex and then intercourse. Without contraception, apparently.
And then the father comes home, finds his son rushing to the bathroom, pants down, Von Yates naked under the blanket.
Which, understandably, leads to a heated confrontation.
Big time. And the teenager was then taken to his grandparents' house for the night.
The immediate aftermath sounds incredibly intense. The stepson reportedly overheard his father yelling at Von Yates using really strong accusatory language. And he also heard Von Yates apparently saying repeatedly that the stepson looked like his father when he was younger.
She kept saying it. Even the next day, things were still unsettling. The report says the stepson called her, and she allegedly expressed regret they were interrupted.
Wow.
So they could have continued into the morning. And again, apparently reiterated the comparison to his father's appearance, even mentioning specific physical traits.
These repeated comparisons are, well, they're particularly noteworthy, aren't they? It suggests this persistent idea in her mind, however unsettling, about some kind of resemblance or maybe even a substitution.
It's hard to fathom. And it didn't stop there. She reportedly called the teen a master manipulator afterwards.
Which is quite the turn, blaming the victim.
Yeah. And interestingly, some other family members, including the father initially, also seemed to blame the boy. The report mentions the father even made threatening statements during a call with the boy's grandfather.
That reaction just underscores the incredibly complex and potentially really damaging family dynamics that explode after allegations like these.
Totally.
And maybe hints at some initial disbelief or denial from the father.
Could be. Fast forward 3 months. The report says the teen got reassurance his dad was now supportive, would testify against her, and didn't want to live with her anymore.
Okay, so a shift there.
But when the father was asked to describe his relationship with Von Yates, he called it complicated.
Complicated. Yeah, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Even with these incredibly serious accusations and supporting his son, that bond with his wife isn't easily defined or severed.
Yeah. And just to wrap up case specifics,
Yeah.
her nursing license was revoked, and she's pleaded not guilty to the sexual battery charge.
Right. A very difficult situation all around.
Okay. So that lays out the disturbing specifics of this one case. Now let's try and shift gears a bit, connect this to some broader themes from our other sources, starting with the surprising prevalence of stepmom porn.
Yeah, this is quite remarkable when you look at the data. An article from Info about back in February 2017 reported that stepmom was actually the top search term on Pornhub.
The number one.
Number one,
Wow.
meaning it was the most popular category searched for. And then a later article from Fatherly in 2023 confirms it's consistently ranked really high in the years since, still among the top 10 most searched terms even then.
That level of popularity is, well, it's quite telling, isn't it? And pornographers even have a name for it. Focused.
Focused.
What's the thinking behind why it's so popular? What's the appeal?
Well, one prominent theory, and this was discussed in that Info About article, suggests it serves as a kind of workaround to an incest fetish.
Okay. A workaround.
Yeah, the idea is it allows people to explore that sort of taboo relationship territory, but without the direct biological connection, which potentially lessens the feelings of guilt that might come with actual incestuous thoughts or fantasies.
So it's like flirting with the forbidden, but keeping that 1 degree of separation, in fantasy anyway. That's a fascinating, if maybe unsettling, concept.
It is, and it's closely related, of course, to the whole MILF phenomenon.
Right, I was just going to say.
The MILF attraction Mother I'd Like to F also centers on an older, often maternal-coded figure. The stepmother character in porn is just a very specific and apparently a highly popular version of that broader attraction.
Which brings us perfectly to that Reddit thread we looked at. It was on Raskmen, and users were discussing why MILFs or cougars are attractive to younger men. What kind of reasons were coming up there?
Several key themes really emerged. A lot of users mentioned that older women tend to know what they want more clearly,
Okay.
and they're maybe less inclined to play manipulative dating games, perceived as more direct, maybe more emotionally mature.
Right. Suggesting a desire for straightforwardness, maybe less drama.
Exactly. Another point that came up a lot was the perception of greater sexual experience.
Mm-hmm.
The idea being older women have had more time to figure out what they enjoy. Maybe they're more comfortable, less inhibited sexually.
Confidence, too, I bet.
Confidence was huge, yeah. Consistently highlighted. A woman, say, in her 40s or older who looks after herself keeps in shape. That's often seen as showing self-care, positive self-image. Very appealing to many.
Okay. What about just fulfilling a fantasy? Did that come up?
Oh, absolutely. Some users were just straight up about it fulfills a fantasy they have. And there was also the suggestion that maybe cougars are more proactive about initiating sex, which some younger guys find attractive. Less guesswork involved, perhaps.
Interesting. And the idea of social conditioning was raised too, right? Though someone pointed out it's not universal across cultures.
That's a very pertinent point, yeah. How much is innate versus learned? The thread also had some, more lighthearted or even slightly cynical takes. One user just said it was because they're squishier.
Ah, okay.
Another just suggested a basic biological drive. But more seriously, one person made a good point that ultimately attractive people are attractive regardless of age. The focus might not always be specifically on older, but just overall attractiveness. A hot mom is just hot. Period.
Right, not necessarily an age fetish per se for everyone. What about the more sort of Psych 101 explanations? Did those surface?
Oh, yeah, those were definitely in the mix. The Oedipus complex or a mother complex that got mentioned, especially for young guys maybe recently out of the family home.
Okay, the classic stuff.
The classics. Others speculated it might stem from wanting what they perceive as easy sex, or the idea that maybe older women aren't looking for serious long-term commitment.
And the influence of media. Porn, movies.
That came up too, specifically mentioning MILF porn itself and things like the American Pie movies as potentially normalizing or even popularizing this kind of attraction, making it more mainstream in a way.
So it's really a whole mix of potential reasons. Practical dating preferences, deeper psychological stuff, cultural influences. Quite a range.
A very diverse range, yeah.
Okay, let's circle back specifically to stepmothers for a moment and this idea of maternal comfort that the Fatherly article brought up. That seemed like a slightly different angle.
It is a particularly interesting angle, I thought. The article suggests that in porn, the stepmom figure might offer a kind of maternal comfort or tenderness to the younger male character, a dynamic maybe less common in standard MILF porn because of that extra layer of the incest taboo. It suggests a different kind of power dynamic, blending the sexual with something more nurturing.
Nurturing, okay. And the psychotherapist quoted in that piece, they raised a compelling point about sexualizing a figure tied to childhood powerlessness, how that might create a feeling of mastery for the viewer.
Yes, that perspective suggests it could be a way for individuals to subconsciously reframe past experiences. If they felt subordinate or dependent as a child, the fantasy lets them feel a sense of control in that dynamic.
Right, taking back power in a way.
Potentially. The article also touches on possible links to unresolved childhood issues around mother-son or stepmother-son relationships. The fantasy becomes a way to sort of exert control over those past dynamics.
And the sociologist in that fatherly piece also linked the stepmom figure in porn to the femdom archetype.
Exactly. Which makes sense given the power dynamics often portrayed. It taps into that established allure of a powerful, dominant female figure that's a recurring popular theme in adult entertainment generally.
Okay, this all really brings us to a critical point, maybe the critical point. How do we separate these fictional portrayals from real life? Because that seems fundamental in both the info about and fatherly articles.
Absolutely crucial. Both sources really hammer home the importance of distinguishing between the world of pornography and the messy complexities of real relationships.
Yeah.
And there's a legitimate concern, right? That people, especially younger people, exposed to a lot of stepmom porn might develop inaccurate, maybe even harmful ideas about real stepmothers and actual stepfamily dynamics.
The fatherly article puts it very bluntly, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It says stepmom sex is almost never really about stepmom sex,
Exactly.
but more about these underlying desires, power dynamics, the stuff we've been talking about. That feels like a really important takeaway.
It really highlights the symbolic nature of these fantasies, I think.
Yeah.
They often represent something much deeper than a literal desire for sex with the stepmother figure. The sociologist in that fatherly piece warns that young people without much media literacy might develop really off-mark ideas about actual stepmothers from watching all this faux shest.
Yeah, dangerous territory if you can't make that distinction. Okay, so to try and bring this all together, we started by looking at the really disturbing details of that case in Florida, Alexis Von Yates, and that incredibly unusual explanation she reportedly gave. We then kind of broadened out, looking at the widespread fascination with stepmother figures in porn and the various psychological, societal theories trying to explain why older, maternal-coded figures hold this attraction.
Yeah, theories ranging from, exploring taboo desires in a safer way to fulfilling needs for comfort or control, or maybe just appreciating confidence and straightforwardness.
Right. And it seems absolutely vital, as you said, to keep hammering home the difference between these fantasy worlds and the reality of human relationships.
Absolutely. The narratives in media, especially porn, just don't reflect the ethical considerations and the real-world complexities, particularly within families. Misconceptions, especially for young people, could have genuinely damaging consequences.
Definitely. Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to maybe mull over. How do all these things, real family dynamics, societal taboos, the stories we consume in media, how do they all interact? How do they influence our understanding of attraction, of relationships? And what might the sheer popularity of themes like this in fiction and fantasy tell us about maybe unspoken desires or anxieties humming beneath the surface of society? It certainly gives you something to think about.